Hello.
Hello.
Everybody's having a great afternoon and Monday and
Oh,
whatnot.
it's very hot and humid here.
Mm-hmm.
Not as hot and humid as Louisiana, but my air conditioner is not that good. So,
Yeah. Thank God for inside. I
well, I was
very much
outside
love
earlier.
inside.
I was outside earlier today. So,
Mm.
but our heat breaks tomorrow.
Ours
Tomorrow.
breaks in October, something like that.
Ours breaks tomorrow, and then it's back to being really, really nice because we got a bunch of tropical air from the hurricane. And Zenny, what have I ever done to you that you would send me a bunch of tropical air from your hurricane? Do I send you my blizzards? No.
How many
So I
people
need
are
you a better
still
friend.
out of power um,
God,
in Texas? I think there's still a considerable amount of people that don't have power.
it's so hot down there. God.
This is the kind of heat that kills people for
Yeah, it
sure.
kills people, exactly. I mean, the heat that's in here is probably not going to kill you. I mean, it's 90 here and
Mhm.
humid, but it's not as humid as there, and it's not as
Yep.
hot. So it's unpleasant, but it will not kill you if you don't have air conditioning. Though most people in Indiana have some form of air conditioning. So,
Yeah, a lot of people during the summertime, this is when people are off of YouTube and not paying attention to their fish tanks. And I actually pay more attention to my fish
oh, yeah,
tanks.
so they don't die.
Yeah, like I
I
in
mean,
cultivating plants and crap like that, just making sure.
yeah, I do less. I mean, I change water, but
Mhm.
I don't, I mean, I'm very focused on outside.
The one thing that I hold off on is ordering fat kitty, ordering plants because it's hot and I see all the plants I want. Everything is in
Yeah.
stock right now, and I'm like, if I order them, then I'm just gonna arrive just a
Yeah.
pile of shit, basically.
Speaking of plants, I got plants on Saturday from Luke Wong, and they came really, really great because it's not that hot here. So
So Steve would like to know: should we pay attention to TDS levels in the aquarium? I'm assuming that that is in relation to plants or really in general.
I
It
mean,
just
if you don't know your TDS, but you know your KH and your GH and your nitrates and your nitrites, that's way more informative.
yeah,
I think that TDS is only useful as a quick and dirty measurement for your RO system because
yeah,
it should measure about 0. Otherwise, your RO system needs the filters serviced.
yeah.
But I
And
don't
if
think it's a
you're
very biological. It's not very relevant because you don't know what those total dissolved solids are.
right,
It could
if
be like
you
organic
have
matter.
RO water and you have like a routine of you want to add this much mineralization to your RO water, and you know that once it's reached those levels that you want, that the TDS reads X amount, then that's a nice quick and dirty way to make sure that you've put enough of the same powder in there after you've mineralized RO water.
Yeah,
So it's an easy way to check. But
yeah,
TDS meters are weird because there's actually a definition of total dissolved solids that a TDS meter actually can't measure. It's just a conductivity meter, and all it's
right.
doing is
So there,
converting a conductivity number
yeah.
to ppm.
And there are things that can dissolve in water that are either non-ionic or weakly
Hmm.
ionic, and so they don't have a charge.
Right.
It means they're not detected by a TDS pen. Now, not many of those because water is polar, so that means that it has a slightly positive end and a slightly negative end.
Hmm.
So oxygen is what's called a very electronegative atom. That means it pulls electrons toward it. So in a water molecule, you have the O right there, and you have an H on one side, and you have an H on the other side. Well, that oxygen is very electronegative, so it slightly pulls the electrons toward it. So it has a slightly negative charge by the O, and that leaves a slightly positive charge by those two H's. And that's why charged things dissolve really well in water. So things like salts or uh, nitrates. Okay, those
Yeah.
dissolve really well. But there are lots of things that are not charged that are polar compounds. So, like sugar. Sugar is very soluble in water, right? Like you guys have all made Kool-Aid before and baked, and you know that sugar is very soluble. Well, sugar isn't charged, but it has polar groups on it. So it also has like hydroxyl groups, so OHs that are really electronegative, and so those will dissolve well. So your TDS pen, like if you were going to like pour a bunch of sugar in your tank, which I don't recommend,
It wouldn't
it would
pick it
not
up.
detect that, but that is a total dissolved solid.
Yeah,
So
and it's probably something you wouldn't want to have in your tank.
no.
And you wouldn't be able to detect it. Is there any home test that you could use to figure out some of that unionized invisible stuff
No, and the thing is like a big reason to do water changes is to get rid of
because of
dissolved
those?
organic waste.
Yeah,
So, and some of those are carbohydrates, not necessarily sugar per se, but if you dumped a bunch of sugar in your tank, well, you're going to get a bacterial bloom probably. So I don't recommend that. But so Jenna asked if the dissolved sugar would affect the KH, pH, or GH. No, it won't. So GH is calcium, magnesium. KH is carbonate, and it's not going to change the pH at all. So if you dissolve sugar like sucrose into water that's pH 7, it will still be pH 7. It's not an acid or a base. So because it's not charged. It's not charged. But the reason why it dissolves really well is because it's polar. So it has hydroxyl groups on it, which is the definition of a carbohydrate. It has carbons with hydroxyl groups. And hydroxyl groups are OHs, and the O's in that are electronegative. So they're pulling the electrons toward it. And so it makes it slightly having charged ends of the molecule, but it's not in and of itself. It's not an ion.
yep.
And Nancy asked, what about sweet tea?
What's
mean,
the appropriate level of sugar in a tank? Can you feed bacteria with it? And can you feed the
I
bacteria
mean,
that you want to have in your tank with sugar?
you'll feed bacteria,
Yeah.
but will you want them? In
Yeah.
general, we don't want dissolved organics in our
Yeah, that's why without being able to detect them and know what levels they are in there, because a TDS pin only tells you if you've got problems and your TDS is high, it tells you that you have more ions in your water, but it doesn't tell you anything
right.
else. So
And the other
water
thing is
displacement is kind of what
TDS
we have.
Yeah, TDS pens are really, really inaccurate. Now they're fine for quick and dirty doing things like judging your RO water. So like did I like if it should read about 0, you don't need to calibrate it, right?
Yeah.
But like if you're testing your tank and it's 200 one day and 300 the next ppm, well that may not mean anything. It sounds like that's a huge increase, right? That's 50% increased total dissolved solids.
Mhm.
But those meters are shit.
They're
You
just
know,
two little metal prongs that are subject to tons of sway based on what's like on the surfaces of them. And I
and
have
then
two
they detect
TDS meters, and they're about 10 to 15% off from each other.
and that's a good scenario. I mean, if you drop it, they're going to be even worse.
Yeah.
If you don't clean it well, or and there's no way to, like with a pH meter, you could at least standardize it.
The other thing too
So they're
is
usually pretty shitty.
if you if you get hot water out of your tap, like I think this is where a lot of the whole like don't use hot water from your hot water heater because your TDS is much higher. No, actually, you just the ions are moving around faster, and your TDS pen doesn't know the difference. Like
Well, but there
it'll
are more
read.
things dissolved in hot water
Not
in
necessarily
your
though.
hot water
Mine,
heater.
for example, there is no difference. But if I measure my TDS with when the water is hot, the
Right.
TDS is is
In your
considerably
water. But if
higher.
you
Yeah.
live in the Midwest, it will be because we get our water from the aquifers. So there's a lot of GH unless you soften your water. And that's
Mm,
why, I mean, like, if you, when I lived in Coralville, Iowa, like everybody has to get a new water heater like every 10
God,
years because they will fill with
it just
sediment.
builds up with yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
but you don't have any GH in your water. But for
Thankfully.
those of us who do, you are going to have more from your hot water. Now, I mean, I don't have a ton of GH in my tank. So in the winter, I don't change the water with cold water. Like I mix some hot in there because otherwise the fish would freeze.
Have you happened to like look at the difference between your GH levels in your hot water heater, like when you just pull
I
water straight
haven't.
from it? I would be curious.
Yeah,
People who have that issue, like get some hot water, let
yeah.
it cool to room temperature, and compare it with your cold tap.
I haven't, but I mean, the water here, my GH is 6 degrees, which is not crazy.
Hmm.
I will say that, when you live in the Midwest, the hot water out of the tap is a little bit cloudy usually. More so like when I lived in Iowa, it was really, really cloudy. Um, because hot water dissolves ions better. I mean, and everybody knows this, right? Like if you want to make a salt solution, it dissolves better if you heat it up. So
So,
anyways, the
so
propagation
KL26, yeah,
of aquatic plants, well, a lot, it depends on the plant. You have to
mhm,
you have to give us a plant. They're
yeah,
propagated in different ways.
KL26. Let us know what plant you're asking about,
Yeah,
because otherwise it'd be a longer discussion of the various ways.
yeah. So
Even some of the same.
Coreworks says they add multivitamins to champagne yeast to feed it longer than the sugar does. We should look at what multivitamins we can add to our tanks to feed bacteria. Well, I actually know a lot about yeast. Like I have a whole PhD in yeast.
All bacteria is equal, right?
Sure. But I mean, vitamins, you still need sugar to feed the yeast, right? They can't eat vitamins. It's just that if they exhaust their other nutrients, because they need things like uracil and they need things, so that's an or that's a nitrogenous base. They need certain amino acids. They need other compounds to keep moving. And if they exhaust those first, it won't matter how much sugar is there, they won't be able to utilize it. So if you add the vitamins, it's no longer a limiting reagent, so they can use the sugar. But yeah, don't dump it in your tank. Just don't.
Mm-mm.
All right. Nathan says we're just the people he needs to see. He recorded
Okay.
a video of 2 of his crypts are melting, switched from liquid fertilizer to dry 2 weeks ago, and all of the sudden crypts are melting. Crypts are just fussy bitches, and
They don't like
sometimes,
change.
yeah, I don't like change. I've had crypts melt because I've done a big rescape before, and I'm just like, oh god, I don't know what to do, but they'll come back. They'll
Yeah.
come back. They also can melt. I know it's real hot down there right now, Nathan. Maybe they're just being a little extra dramatic because it's hot. But they'll come back. Don't worry. Just get rid of any of the rotting leaves. Just if it's dead and dying, just remove it and don't do anything. Just don't dig it up. Don't disturb the area. They'll come back.
The one time I had a problem with the dry fert is I was thinking that I needed more micros. This was back when I thought that plant deficiency charts were real and applicable to aquatic plants.
Uh,
But I ended up
they're
dosing the
not
shit out
applicable.
of
They're,
micros.
yeah, they're not applicable to land plants either. I mean, or that chart, like it always has like this is an iron deficiency. No, it's not. Like iron deficiency is the easiest thing to diagnose because it's the yellowy veining.
Yeah.
Like if you have a plant outside that is veining out its iron deficiency, a lot of times that's caused by high pH, too much clay, or like watering problems. But it's an iron problem. And I've had plants before in my tank once or twice that have been chlorotic, but it's not usually a problem. So
Yeah, I've definitely harmed my plants with all the micros. Like those micros can be pretty toxic if you
yeah.
put too many in there. Like
Yeah, it's
not
not good
just
for
to
your
plants and
fish
but
either.
fish. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is this, the order that plants need of nutrients that's most important for them, water. Okay, that's never going to be a problem in your tank, right? It's a problem for your house plants and your land plants, though. Okay, then carbon, so CO2, not a problem for the outdoor plants, but a big problem for the indoor ones. And so
Yeah.
if your KH is too high or you're not ejecting enough CO2, that's going to be an issue. And then, so we have up there importance. Then the next level, oh, and light. Light is also, that's a high need. Okay, then way below it on the tier of necessity
The
are
NPK.
NPKs. And N is more important than P, which is more important than K. Nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. Those are your macronutrients. And when you see a fertilized bottle or you buy something, even like fertilizer for your house plants or your land plants, it'll be number dash number dash number NPK. And that's what those numbers mean. The higher the number, the more nutrient it has in it.
Hmm.
Okay. And then way below that in what a plant needs are micronutrients. Okay. And yes, it needs them. The most important of those is iron. And then I think magnesium is a little below that, and calcium. And then it kind of works on down the list.
Manganese is in
Manganese,
there, boron, and zinc, which
copper. They need a tiny bit of copper. I mean, they
right.
need lots of things. And you can think about it like this. What do you need to survive, right? Most important, you need oxygen. That's your most important nutrient. Second most, you need water. Third most, you need carbohydrates. Below that, you need protein. And then, like, way below that, you need riboflavin and vitamin C. I mean, do you need those things? Sure, you need them, but you're going to die way sooner if you don't have water.
So in terms of those trace, they literally are trace amounts. So like zinc, there's a zinc anode in the water heater that corrodes to prevent the tank from rusting. Is zinc hazardous for shrimp? I mean, in the proper amount, heavy metal.
Yeah. So, and the thing is it's zinc oxide. And I don't know that zinc oxide, because so zinc can exist in different redox states, which a lot of metals can. So it's like with iron, you can have ferrous and ferric. And ferrous is not really usable, but ferric is. And those are different redox states. And I don't know what redox potential it is with shrimp. And I also don't know what levels are bad. I am not a shrimp expert, but I do know that the most serious shrimp people use RO water for
Yeah.
rebreeding.
And the thing is with say you're keeping like sensitive caridina shrimp, it seems like one of the things that makes them extra sensitive to shifting in water parameters is the fact that like all of these heavy metals are more soluble, become ionized, and have that extra toxic state as the pH drops. So
Right. And that's redox potential. So
yeah.
they are in a more reduced state, which means they have more electrons, means they're more reduced, which is very counterintuitive, but it's the way it is. So I can't tell you. I just know that there's a reason serious shrimp breeders, when they have very sensitive shrimp, they always use RO water. So with something like my blue neocaradinas, I doubt they notice anything. They would survive an apocalypse. They are pretty hardy. So, but if I had shrimp that I bought for like $50 a shrimp, I'd use RO water. I would use, and then remineralize it with something like salty shrimp or
Yeah.
whatever brand of remineralizer you want to use. So,
Oh, Mike's got a question. I'm just going to defer to Kelly for this one.
all right, if my GH is 4, KH is 7, TDS is 240, how far will my pH drop with 7 bubbles per second of yeast, sugar, DIY CO2, and 34 grams of banana stem?
It's not a lot of banana stem botanicals.
It's not, but hopefully you enjoyed that banana and maybe you had like a smoothie with it or some banana bread. I mean, so hopefully you got some use
Cool.
out of it. Um, Botanicals don't really change your KH or your pH hardly at all.
I'm still waiting for it. That
Yeah,
water is opaque in my living room, and
it's surprising. The most effective one is peat.
yeah,
And that's not surprising. Peat bogs are very, very acidic. However, if you've ever tried to work with peat, it's very messy, it's powdery, it's hard to wet it. So
it's
it will
also
just
the
kind of,
last thing you would
yeah,
want to dissolve in your water if you were trying to keep plants in that water.
it it's yeah, it's not great. So
So Jenna
yeah,
was,
and yeah, and as far as your DIY CO2, we'll go with your yeast and sugar, and you're doing 7 bubbles a second. It's probably going to drop your pH quite a bit until it runs out of gas. I mean, it
mm,
could drop it too far. If you have 7 bubbles per second on a 5-gallon tank, probably going to kill your fish. So, and you just don't have control with the old DIY CO2.
Jenna was saying I missed a question from Steve. I saw he was mentioning water parameters. I didn't see. I might have missed if he had a question. Steve, if you're still here, if you can type the question for us, because I was looking through it and I
Yeah.
didn't see if you had a question.
Annette had a question earlier. She wanted to know about the dustiness in aqua soil. So over time, it does get less dusty, I've noticed, like
Yeah.
as it becomes fully saturated with water. You could rinse it before you put it in. At least give it a quick, rinse with the hose. I've never rinsed it and have not had much of a problem with it. I would suggest just not stirring it up that much.
I've rinsed it and not rinsed it, and either way, there's some shit that stirs up in it, and it gets picked up by our filter. It's settled.
Yeah, and I'll just say this, if you think it's dusty, you have lived a privileged life because there's way worse out there. So, like, if you use like Turfus Pro League or, oh my God, that's just disgusting, or fluorite and you don't rinse it,
Ugh.
or potting soil, like, ugh, it's way, way worse. Aqua soil is a dream to work with in comparison. So Stan says, my plant game sucks. I feel you, man.
No, it's just your water. You would be just as good at
Yeah,
plants as anyone else if
exactly.
you had water that wasn't like that.
I was so much better. I'm so much better at growing plants here than I was in Iowa. I'm so much better. And if I were to move to Seattle, man, maybe I would be a horticultural master gardener for plants like 19 times over. Probably not, because I don't think I'd care, but yeah, if you're using RO now for top offs and small changes, can you do larger changes without harming the fish? Fish are, I mean, I can't speak for every fish because I haven't kept every
Mm.
fish. I keep rainbows, which are pretty hardy, and I don't think would care. But I think that you should spread it out gradually over a couple weeks if you're concerned, and the fish will be okay.
Yeah, like if you're trying to gradually increase your like the dilution and maybe cut some of that KH and maybe cut it in half. I know that's what Dee Dee does. I don't know at what level she does dilution, but she has the same
Right.
issue with her water hardness off the charts. So
Yeah.
it really helped her a lot. She combined dilution with RO water and CO2 injection, which brings her to that level of being able to keep a really, really wide variety of plants and
Yeah, I
have them
think Dee
looking
Dee's
well too.
great at growing plants now that she has more amenable water, and it's not like all of a sudden she leveled up her skills, she leveled up her water.
Yep.
So I guess what I would suggest doing is do some small water changes to start. Start with like 20%. change with RO water. That's not going to give your fish a huge change. They'll be fine. Next week, do another 20%, then another 20%. And you'll notice that your GH and KH are going down over time. And then you can start doing some large 50% water changes. Now, you are not, you're either going to want to do one of two things: cut the water with some of your tap water or remineralize.
Yeah.
Because fish need GH, plants need GH also. So it's up to you how you want to do that. But I think doing a 20% water change with straight RO, your fish will be fine.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't say for every fish, right? You have to
It's
be the judge of what fish you have. If you think they're unusually sensitive, but the fish I keep would be fine.
Yeah, I mean, rainbow fish are hardy.
Right.
They like
Or
clean water. They're not too picky. Just have some ions in there for them, and they're good.
yeah,
Like,
rainbows really hate like dissolved organic waste.
yeah.
That's what they hate.
So, looking to breed yellow blue-eyed longfin plecos in a 29-gallon tank with guppies. You think this will be fine as long as you are keeping up with the water changes, because I had like endlers and a bunch of plecos breeding in a 29. The feeding is just like outrageous, the amount of food that they need to go through.
Pooping, it's
So
so much
yeah,
pooping. I mean, because those
so
are
I'm
kind of both
talking
big poopers.
filter rinsing and water changes
Yeah,
multiple times a week, but
yeah,
it's doable. I mean, a lot of people do that to breed
sure,
in mass, and it's just it
sure.
all it takes
And
is tons of fresh water.
yeah, and the best breeders and the best aquascapers have one thing in common, and it's lots of water changes.
Okay, yeah, he's asking how often water changes. I'm hoping I'll be able to get rid of the pleco babies quickly, but probably have to grow them out for a bit. I mean, I had like over 100 plecos and countless endlers and a 29. I was water changing at least 3 to 4 times a week, and I mean, the more the merrier in this case.
Yeah.
So
Let's put it this way.
we're
I'm
talking
not,
like
yeah,
75% water changes too.
I think that a baseline water change for me is 50% once a week. And I usually do more like
Mhm.
70% or 80% once a week. If I had that stocking, I guess I'd probably do that twice a week, maybe 3 times a week. I don't know. I would never do that. I hate plecos. And I also don't like guppies.
Yeah, it's a combination of very voracious eaters and constant poopers.
Constant pooping, so much pooping. If you've got plants, hopefully you do. That'll help some, but it's not going to help you
No,
with the organic waste.
it's not gonna the
Not
plants and that kind of stocking does not displace water changes at all. It was also a
doesn't.
plant farm full of like water sprite going crazy. You know how much of a nutrient hog that is, and yeah,
Yeah,
it just
and it's not going to get rid of the organic waste. So Zenny says, I think all the storms and barometric pressure changes have made all the fishes frisky. To be
nice.
fair, the endlers are kind of just add water. Well, that's the truth. It's like Medaka rice fish or just had add water. I got Medaka rice fish from Nancy B. I got eggs. They're growing up real nice. And I bet there's babies in there, which is so exciting. They breed like rabbits. So
Pass,
easy.
passing winds got a CO2 reactor.
Nice. Nice. So
It's a
you
nice efficient
decide to go
way.
with the reactor. Okay. Good
Yeah,
choice. Yeah.
uh,
I
the,
like inline diffusers, but reactors work too. Cool.
yeah, either one works.
Yeah,
Exactly
it's
20%.
whatever you like. Whatever
Well,
you like.
exactly 20% of what? I don't know. Let's
I don't know.
see.
Were we talking about like how much water to change with RO? Oh,
Oh,
you don't know
maybe.
exact, but like
Yeah,
roughly 20.
it's
I
just
mean, like,
like eyeball it.
yeah, like about.
It's like seeing that water line dropped a couple inches around some. uh,
Yeah, it'll be fine.
It's like if I say I do a 50% water change and the water line is 50% down the tank, I'm not even accounting for the substrate. So it could be like 60 to 75%.
Yeah,
But it doesn't matter. Like in my water and your water, obviously, we're replacing similar water that's clean.
right. Yeah, and Sarah says, I'm too OCD or something. Measuring out remineralizer stresses me out. Remember that, like, these are not exact systems, right?
Nah.
So, like, you think your tank, it's called a 40-gallon tank. Well, if you measure, like, if you were to actually measure how much water in there, first of all, it's not exactly 40 gallons, I'm sure.
Right.
Plus, then, like, your substrate takes out some volume and your hardscape takes out some volume, but your filter adds some volume. And this is biology. Nothing is precise in biology. So as long
Yeah.
as you're close, good enough. Good
And since
enough.
like my tap water, I have zero GH, so I always have to add the powder. And you think I'm measuring out the exact powder? Like my GH levels can vary by several degrees depending on the day and depending on how much powder I decided to toss in there at any given time. Or I'm like, I gave it a lot last week. I'm not going to give it any this week. It has
Yeah.
never ever been an issue.
Yeah, and fish and plants are pretty adaptable. You just want it kind of in a reasonable range. So, and that goes true with fertilizing too. Like, I mean, I think keep things pretty constant, but like I'm not measuring that close, right? Even back when I used to do EI dosing, like people get their little measuring spoons out. I just kind of sprinkle a little bit in. It worked okay. So,
Okay. Hi, Foxy's grandbaby.
hello, hi there.
Hi.
Please stop getting Grandma Foxy sick. Please stop. Nancy says the Medacas grow so fast. I've seen this year's babies with eggs already. Babies having babies. I
Oh,
know. They're crazy. I am not a fish breeder at all, but I can breed Medacas. You know why? Because I just put them outside and I don't even feed them. They're just so prolific.
let's
So
see. And meanwhile, nothing lives in my pond except plants.
it's pretty hot out there. Yeah,
It's heat or predation. It's one
yeah.
or the
I
other.
think
Don't
it's
know.
probably predation because
Hmm.
your pond is pretty big and it's not in baking full sun all day, and you have water movement. I think something's eating it. I think you have predators. Maybe you have a bunch of dragonfly nymphs.
Mm.
I don't know what it is, but I think it's probably predators. Do you have frogs?
Oh yeah, there's
Yeah.
now it's dominated by tadpoles. So
Oh, there you go. They're eating up everything. So you're just raising tadpoles, which you know what? That's pretty great.
tadpoles are cool. I like
Yeah.
froggies.
I wish I would get frogs in my ponds, but there's too many fucking cats. Like just
Yeah.
significant cat pressure.
So, do you think I should just not have substrate in the pleco tank, or will it not really matter? I saw the video from 2 years ago where you had pleco and 29-gallon, and it just had a clear bottom. Yeah, I don't remember why I went with bare bottom. Probably I read some sources that said something about it, and it seemed to work out. I couldn't tell you whether I would have been more or less successful had I added gravel or sand or
I don't think it
whatever.
I don't think it matters. I mean, bare
Nah,
bottom tanks are easier to clean, but they're not as easy to grow plants in. And I do think you're going to want to keep it heavily planted. Now, do you
yeah, I
still
just
need
had
to feed a
floating water
water change?
sprite. But,
Yes. Yeah, water
mhm.
spray. There you go. You're still going to want to do water changes, but the plants
Yeah,
give you a little edge. The nice thing about substrate is it's more surface area for beneficial bacteria.
true. I
So
didn't worry about it. I was changing water so much that I'm like, that's going to be how this tank stays clean, not with nitrification. But I'm sure there was some beneficial bacteria. It just was not going to do the job for
yeah.
that
And
crazy.
beneficial bacteria are not going to remove dissolved organic waste.
Right.
So I just would remove the babies as fast as you can, or consider like not breeding both of those, or consider getting a 40 breeder, or consider never getting plecos because they kind of suck.
So here we go. Here's a tip from the lady who had to mostly be the one to catch the plecos out when it was time to sell them. She said, I will say floating plants that were removable and a bare bottom made it much
Yeah.
easier to catch the fish when it was time.
Yeah, let me tell you this, catching fish in like this tank is not fun. It's not fun. So there's a reason fish store tanks are bare bottom.
Yeah. So any plants recommended for that? Just the nutrient hogs and this is stuff
Fast
that's not going to
growers.
be
Fast
this like
growers.
don't do duckweed. Try to
Oh,
avoid annoying stuff like that just for your own
yeah.
sanity. But
Any fast growing stems, pogo stem enceladus octopus would be one.
that's a good one.
Hygrophila corymbosa cherry leaf is a good one. Hygrophila sunset is a good one. Anything that grows really fast is going to be a good choice
Mhm.
and soaks up nutrients. Now, if you want floating plants, non-floating plants are harder to keep because they block out light. So that's just a choice you can make.
Yeah. So I love
I don't.
plecos. They look cool. Kelly just doesn't like anything that's not rainbow fish.
I do like non-rainbow fish. I just really don't like plecos. They're ugly and they poop a lot and they eat your swords.
Yeah, they eat the plant compatibility is an
Then
issue.
you never see them. And a lot of them are expensive. Just don't really have anything good to say about plecos. So there you go.
I was scrolling Facebook today, saw someone post an Amazon sword that like the minute I saw it, I'm like, oh, they have a pleco. First
Yeah, I
response,
know.
potassium deficiency. Like, oh
Ah,
Jesus. I gotta keep
you have
scrolling because I
you have a
can't
pleco
uh,
excess. You have a
yeah.
pleco excess. And not just plecos will rasp on swords. I've had Psicopterus gobies that have kind of rasped on my swords before. But Psicopterus gobies are really cool, so
I
I
see
give
the
them a
hill
pass.
streams on them a lot, but they don't seem to do any damage to them.
No, they don't seem to really rasp. And the little gobies, like the Stiphodon gobies, they're fine. They're fine. Steve says water lettuce grows well for me. It grows well for everyone. It does block out light, though, is the only issue.
Yeah.
It can kind of fry, like especially if your tank is, if you have a lid and you have lights, it gets really hot under there, and
Mhm.
it can scorch a little bit. So
But yeah, it will make its own lid if you let it.
yeah, that is true.
So while we have some people here, I just, in case y'all haven't noticed the poll I posted on my community tab, y'all should go take a look.
Yeah,
I'm very curious what people's aesthetic preferences are for lighting. So I posted one the other day, had these 4 lights here, and then I realized, oh, these are tiny pictures, so I posted larger pictures here. So and I
yeah, that was good.
labeled them.
Like I always look at those things on my phone, so they were the size of postage stamps.
Yeah, and it was pretty clear very early on that Light 2 was a runaway, and obviously it's also like twice as expensive as the next most expensive light in the poll. So I'm like, all right, let me take that one out. Let me replace it with something like more in line price wise. So this is the second part of the poll. Right now it's got 40 votes. I would like to get as many votes as possible. Just take a look on the community tab, look at A, B, C, D. Like some of them are very subtle differences.
Yeah, those were much more subtle.
Yeah.
Those were a little more difficult to decide. But remember that how something looks in a picture you're going to post on Instagram are not the only criteria for choosing
Hmm.
a light. Intensity is very important.
Yeah.
You
So
need
one
enough
thing to note
draw.
is like the intensity of each of these lights, I tried to match, and they are all the inappropriate, like they would all suitably grow the plants in this tank. This is just a low tech, no CO2 tank.
Yeah. And you don't need a lot of intensity with a shallow tank. But if you have
Right.
like a 90, you need a lot of par to get to the
Yes.
bottom of it. So that's a consideration. And then things like apps are nice, dimmers.
Some apps are nice and some apps are the
Some
worst.
apps suck. So, those are considerations too. So it's not just how your pictures are going to look on Instagram.
Hmm.
So
But yeah, there's seems to be a trending preference on this one too. If I get like I want to get a decent amount of votes, and then maybe towards the end of the week, I'll reveal which is which. But we already know that on the first poll, number 2 was the Chihiros. Like but you got to,
Yeah, and I have a
it's a
Chihiro. I
pricey
have a
light.
Chihiro's light on one tank too, and it is expensive. However, it's a very good value for the money because it has
Hmm.
wider front to back than a lot of lights are. So you don't, if you have a big tank like this one, you wouldn't need as many fixtures to get good coverage. And two, it
Yeah.
has crazy good par. It has way more par than like I have Fluval 3.0s on these tanks, and their par is not even close to as good as the
Yeah, it's
Chihiros.
worth noting that when I put the Chihiros on this tank, there were some lights I had to keep it 100% to match the intensity. With the Chihiros, I bumped it down to about 20% to
Yeah.
match the rest of them.
Yeah. So I mean, those are things to consider.
Thanks, Anthony. 4.99
Yeah.
super sticker or chat. I can't tell on the StreamYard side, but appreciate it. Let's see. One last thing. I also am planning on getting a 10-gallon shrimp breeding tank and plants you
Nice.
recommended for that. And are there any specific Neocaridina shrimp you recommend that sell well, look cool? So Neocaridinas that sell well, if you're talking local, that is very much dependent on your
Yeah.
local market. Some places Neocaridina shrimp in general are worth nothing, and whereas like in other places they might be highly in demand.
Yeah. And as for what plants to put, I think you should scape it as beautifully as you want. I think, I
Yeah.
think you can just make the prettiest, most beautiful scape you can imagine, and the shrimp will be happy. Any plants are good plants.
If you're around in like 3 hours and 19 minutes, the Garden of Eater goes live, and they are a fantastic resource on shrimp
Yeah.
knowledge in general.
And
So,
they are also fantastic aquascapers. So they
indeed, yeah.
do both. And so any plants, anything you want to try out, anything you're curious about growing, anything you like the looks of, your shrimp are going to love it, and they will gently groom all the leaves and be very happy.
I love Neos just because I don't have to pay attention to water parameters for them.
Right. They're super easy. And I am not really much of a shrimp breeder. I don't keep them in my rainbow tanks. I could. They have a lot of hiding places. But yeah, they're very easy. Very easy. I wouldn't want to sell them because I just don't want to deal with that. But go to your club auctions and see what things are going for.
Yeah, like Luke said, Twin Star is another brand I would like to look into. He said,
Yeah, those are
in
very
terms of
nice
like pure
brands.
par and spread, they're just no, it's just surface of the sun or off. So
Yeah, and the thing is, this is like I'm not willing to go without control for a fancy light now. I want at least an integrated timer, and I would like a ramp on and a ramp off. I think that's kind of the
mhm.
baseline of what I would like. I appreciate an app unless it's a shitty app, which case I don't like it. I also think it's nice to have some control over your color spectrum, not because I think the plants care particularly, but because I think, aesthetics matter, especially if you're going to spend a lot of money on a light. I think, I don't want my fish to look super fake. Um, and I want some choice over that. So if Twin Star, though, you just don't have that. You have nothing but intensity. So I think newer lights just give you a lot more.
So it looks like Jenna tried to post the Garden of Eden link, but it was the wrong thing, but she retracted it.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, and Zen posted the link to their YouTube channel. Jenna posted the link to their Fishfam link page. You can see all of your links. So there you go.
Yeah. So Luke says my growth light on the farm tanks is very ugly Kelvin wise, but it will max out an apogee par meter. So I'm actually not sure how much par over 4,000. Well, and that's important for you because you are growing lots of difficult species, and the plants don't care. So chlorophyll plants, aquatic plants, and actually all terrestrial plants and green algae have chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B in them, and they absorb best in blue and red wavelengths, and white is made of all wavelengths of color. They don't absorb well in the green spectrum, and that's why they reflect green back at you. So any wavelengths that are not absorbed are reflected back. That's why leaves look green. Now, they have some accessory pigments called carotenoids and xanthophylls, which will pick up some of those yellow and orange pigments. And that's why you'll see plants coming in a little bit reddish colored or orangish. But plants love red light, they love blue light. Do I want a tank that looks magenta? Not really. I mean, it doesn't look that good.
But I've got
But,
that on
you
these
know,
bright ass panels on my plant farm that have that super blue and red spectrum for a few hours in the day because it helps. It's just, yeah, it's not
yeah,
something I would
I
want
mean,
on my display ever.
exactly. So, but there is a myth out there, and we've covered this before, but it's a persistent myth because a lot of people who have great big channels and lots of subscribers, but have never taken freshman biology, think that blue light causes algae. And I'm here to tell you it does not. If you look up the action spectrum for chlorophyll, yeah, right. You can look it up on Wikipedia. You can look it up in any biology textbook. You will see peaks in red and peaks in blue. And plants love blue light. So if a plant has chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B, and every single plant in here has chlorophyll A and B, and every plant you see outside has chlorophyll A and B, it's loving red and blue light. It loves blue light.
Yeah, I
Now,
don't
does your
think
algae
algae
also
really
love blue?
discriminates. Yeah.
It likes if it has chlorophyll A and B, it does too. And
Mhm.
green algae has chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B. So it likes it too. So that is a myth, and it's just people saying things who have never taken freshman biology.
Does the myth come from the fact that like blue is just really easy to penetrate through the water line, and so it just seems like and plants
Yeah,
are pretty efficient at using it anyway,
I
so
mean,
it's
possibly.
easier to have an
Yeah,
excess of blues and an excess of light is going to
I
cause
mean,
algae.
possibly, but that is just not very relevant. In our tanks are pretty shallow, right? I mean, if you're
Yeah,
talking about a coral reef that's like 15 feet deep, okay, yeah,
right.
then like it's the blue wavelengths, they're higher energy. And so those are the ones that penetrate better because they're higher energy. And that's why down in the deep, everything looks kind of blue. But your tanks aren't that deep. There isn't just it's just not an issue. It's not an issue. In fact, I could turn this tank to only blue light. I would have to put more fixtures on there
Mhm.
because it probably wouldn't be enough intensity, but everything would grow just fine. Maybe even better than fine
It
because
just wouldn't be fun to look at.
would not be. And I think it would stress out the fish because they don't want to look at they're not evolved to look at tons of blue light. So, you know.
This is probably a good point too. Like the myth could be because like night modes are blue. If you never turn your lights off, you'll get lots of algae. Like if you,
Yeah, and I don't believe that at all. It's just I think it could stress out your fish. I mean, we get stressed out by blue light too, and that's why they tell you should limit your screen usage
Mhm.
after dark. And now phones, like I don't, iPhones have this. I'm sure other phones do too. They have an automatic setting that comes on at, I don't know, mine comes on at like 10 o'clock or something, and
Mine
all
too.
of a sudden, yeah, it
And
reduces.
it really does help. There is a noticeable difference.
A lot of research has shown that we have blue light receptors in our eyes. We have them all over our body, and they control a lot of our biorhythms and our hormones, and fish have that too. And so it probably stresses them out to have a
Mhm.
blue light on them all night. I don't use the blue moonlights. I mean, my lights are on from like 12 to 10, noon to 10. And after 10, they can be in the dark. Like they need to rest. They need to sleep too. So has nothing to do with the plants, though. The plants don't care, but the fish care.
So Thorntrap said, "Amazing how long duckweed roots can be." And I don't know if this is true at all,
I
but
have not heard.
I have heard, and I have had tanks where the duckweed roots get hella long, and then tanks where they just kind of stay stubby. But I haven't done any testing I've just heard that the lower your nitrate level is, the longer the roots are in
Doesn't
duckweed.
surprise me because it's searching for nutrients. I'm just really bad at growing duckweed. I have never had it proliferate in any place or
Congratulations.
pond. I suck at growing duckweed, so I can't really offer a lot of comment. All
Nathan
right.
says, my CO2 solenoid is the type you put a CO2 line to both sides, but I'm noticing the side between it and the bottle is expanding when off. Solenoid.
I don't understand what you mean. The CO2 doesn't connect to the solenoid. Do you mean your regulator? I don't,
Is
and
it
also I don't know what that means. Can you show us a picture?
side between it and the
And also,
bottle is
the
expanding?
side
It's
is expanding, the bottle is expanding, or the side is okay, the tube is expanding. I
like
don't
it's
know what you're
building up
talking
pressure.
about. Put a picture in Discord and we'll try to figure it out. But if you see things expanding, that means it's going to burst.
Yeah.
And that's not safe. That's not good. These are pressurized gases. Like, I would just unplug the system because you don't want like something to burst and dump in your tank and kill all your fish. You don't want something on your cylinder to pop off and hurt someone. I mean, just don't fuck around. Just stop
Mhm.
fucking around. Just unplug it. Just stop fucking around.
It's good advice for everyone, just
It
in
is.
general.
Just
I,
don't
I
fuck
need to take that
around.
advice sometimes.
I know.
So Nabokov fan, welcome. And so he's got the nerdy engineer perspective. There are studies about lights at different spectrums, blue versus green versus red. Sometimes red is pink, sometimes blue isn't blue, and wavelength does different things, but light is energy.
Light is energy, and light is measured in nanometers. And I cannot remember the exact nanometers of each color because it has been too long since I've known that information. But if you look up the action spectrum of chlorophyll, it will tell you the nanometers of light that are used. And it's not just that nanometer, right? It likes, right? It's a peak. And it likes it best at a certain peak, but it covers all of that. Where it doesn't use it well is green. Doesn't use green light. And that's why
Hmm.
threw off my phone. It reflects the green light back. And that's why plants look green.
The one light that I have that has a green adjustable setting is the Fluval Aqua Sky. I'm not sure why, but I think the Aqua Sky light I think is more for aesthetics.
Yeah,
Wasn't meant to
that's
be a plant light.
aesthetics. It's not going to do a thing for helping your plants grow because I mean, plants can use some green light. They have accessory pigments so they can use it. Plants are, they're very clever that way. They have xanthophylls, they have carotenoids. So that carotenoids are like what, and xanthophylls. So you can see those in the autumn when the leaves start turning colors. So the chlorophyll dies first, and that leaves the xanthophylls and the carotenoids left are orange and yellow, and that's why they're so pretty. So they can use some green, but it's not that effective. But if you're blasting your plants with tons of green light, it's going to reflect all of that back, so they will look extra green. But it's not because they're growing more. But a lot of light choices are aesthetics. A lot of
Yeah.
it's aesthetics.
See, is a botanical experiment still going? It is. I mean, I don't know how long I'm supposed to keep this going to conclude that adding a crap ton of leaves and driftwood and whatever. I think I got a bunch of alder cones in there. Yeah,
I mean, you will go
alkalinity
until they
has not
rot.
moved. What?
I mean, you'll go until they rot, I
Yeah,
guess.
I guess. Yeah, just let them rot. But yeah. So far, alkalinity has held strong with all that.
I mean,
Some
there may
disgusting
be
looking water.
some other benefits to botanicals. I am a little skeptical of like any antimicrobial health benefit for fish. Maybe. I'm pretty skeptical of it because I'm pretty skeptical of it.
I
But
mean, until I see studies like
Yeah,
peer-reviewed studies on it, then I don't know anything, because there's way too much
yeah,
pseudoscience. And like, I've
right.
in recent years am learning how much crap has been fed to me that was not even true, and that
So
it can
bad.
be
And the
easily
thing is,
verified with
right.
looking up a study. Like, I
And the thing is like, imagine it from my perspective when I look up the studies, because I have a lifetime of reading peer reviewed studies. I can
Mhm.
tell you that a lot of those studies are also shit.
Yeah, that
And
kind of
that's the hard thing
really
too.
complicates the shit for me too, which is why
Right.
the videos I've been working on, I send you the script. I'm like, and you even like found one of the studies I cited, and you're like, that's an old study.
Right.
They didn't have the technology to even verify the existence of the bacteria there. Like, oh, well, that is relevant to this whole thing, because these studies get cited by other people
Right. And
as to prove an entirely different point.
And I think the important thing to remember, and this is true whether you're dealing with your aquarium or your health or fixing your roof, there's a reason we have experts. And you just have to trust that, like, people who went to school a really long time or trained in a profession a really long time, that they know what they're doing. And you can't make that's why you go to your doctor when you're sick, and you don't just say, well, I know what to do, I'll just fix myself. you know you don't understand. And you'll be like, oh, I saw this study, and so it
Mhm.
must be this. Your doctor is the one who has the perspective to decide that.
Yeah.
So when you look at fish experts, they may have a lot of experience in one thing, but like they're telling you about like how plant physiology works, and they've never taken freshman biology. Well, I mean, are they really the best person? Now, if Tom Barr tells you, you know plants
Mhm.
do this, I mean, Tom Barr has a PhD in plant. He is a plant physiologist. He knows a lot more than I do about plant physiology by far. So he's a good person to listen to. So that's why we have experts.
Indeed. And let's see, what's our question? How often do you have to trim your plants in your tank?
Whenever they need it.
Depends. Yeah,
When
I
they
mean,
need
I
Yeah.
have CO2 injected tanks with that I'm intentionally growing very fast growing stems, and I have
Mhm.
to trim that one at least once a week. And then I've got
Yeah.
some that are low tech, low light, a bunch of crypts, and I don't touch those for,
Yeah.
sometimes months.
And there's different reasons to trim.
Mhm.
Sometimes we're trimming for plant health. So if one plant is shading another plant, sometimes we're trimming for aesthetics. So if you want your stem plants to have be nice and bushy and nicely shaped, you'll trim them a lot. So and certain plants just don't need it. I know it looks like I have a lot of plants in these tanks, but they're very low maintenance, and I
Yeah.
trim every couple months. And it's mostly just I'm thinning certain things out. I'm not really like doing a lot of trimming. Now, if you have a lot of stems and you have a lot of light and you have a lot of nutrients and you have a lot of aesthetic wants, you want something to look pretty, you're going to spend an hour trimming a tiny tank every single week.
And stems in particular are not ones that you can ignore for very long, or otherwise you're gonna lose a good bit of it. Like, you're gonna have to top it and replant it. And
Yeah, if you have a high light tank, a high energy tank with lots of CO2 and lots of rotalas, guess what you're doing every Saturday?
trimming party. All
Trimming
right, so Nathan posted
party.
a video, so let's see what we can see.
See, we'll make it a little bigger.
I don't know.
Now I can't see the chat, but all right. Why is that wobbling? Why is that wobbling? I don't like that. Where the solenoid is
So
attached.
this so basically, where a bubble, so this is like one of those DIY kits,
Uh,
where a bubble counter might be installed. Instead, there is some airline tubing that leads to a third party solenoid. instead of a bubble counter so that he can control when it's on or off.
I don't like that.
I have no experience with something like that to say whether
I wouldn't trust it.
I just, yeah,
You know,
pressurized air that, yeah, I don't,
as I
I
mean,
don't know.
there are many things in this world you can cheap out on, right? Like you can keep a t-shirt for 20 years and I mean it'll be threadbare and ugly, but it's just fine. And in this hobby there are things you can cheap out on. You can cheap out on substrate, you can cheap out on lights. You can cheap out on your stocking. You could breed all your fish so you wouldn't buy many fish. But you
Mhm.
cannot cheap out on CO2. That is a way to kill all your fish. If
Luke
you
is saying that it's a pretty low pressure system. I've not used one of those, so I don't know.
I don't
As in,
know.
so
I
like
just
maybe the bulging line isn't an issue with bursting. It's just, it's
yeah, I mean, also what kind of
inconsistent
line are
CO2
you
is my
using?
worry with that.
Are you using regular airline? Because regular airline is not CO2 safe. It will. What happens is you have CO2 in your line and traces of water. The CO2 dissolves and it forms carbonic acid and it eats away at regular airline and it causes it to burst. So, and Greg says that the solenoid is on the wrong side of the bubble counter.
Well, the bubble counter is after the solenoid before the tank is what I can see. It's just the way this is set up. It it's not conducive to like having doesn't seem like it's conducive to having a solenoid in the first place, but you can install one in line if you use airline. And just a matter of like, is it okay for that pressure to be building up in that line? I don't know. Because
Yeah.
I've never used one, but Luke does have one, doesn't use it, but he does have it.
And he never paid for it. He's very clear that he did not spend money on it. I just wouldn't trust it. I wouldn't trust it. And, maybe you don't care about your fish.
Well, I don't think
I
I don't think that
think the
that
line will just
pressure buildup in
burst.
that line is gonna hurt the fish, but
Yeah, because maybe the line will just burst. I don't know.
yeah,
I just don't want to. I don't want to fuck around with that. Like, I would rather use no CO2 than a shitty regulator.
yeah, I've gotten to that point too, where
It's
because
not worth
I
it.
just the
And
better
yeah,
regulators lead to way more consistent
they're easier to use.
CO2.
They are, I mean, because when I put on a new CO2 bottle, it takes me 10 minutes to dial it in. I don't have to stay here all day watching my CO2 and fiddle, fiddle, fiddle with it all day because I have a good regulator. It's a one time expense, a good regulator. And I have used a shitty regulator that failed, and I will never do that
Hmm.
again. And everybody has to learn these lessons somehow. You can either learn them by taking advice, or you can learn them by having a bad experience. So, up to you.
Yeah, so Nabokov was suggesting like a better option would be remove the CO2 solenoid, install a bell in the tank, then fill the bell every day. Yeah, I mean like that passive CO2 dissolution, that would help if you had basically no KH or little to no KH in your water,
It's
but
not very effective.
no, not it.
It's
There's just
something
none
they
of that's
used
going to
to
be.
yeah, it's something they used to do back in the day, but you will not have if you measure
I
your
tried it
decrease in
myself,
pH over a day, it's
or
not
I
gonna budge much.
yeah,
You
like before I
really
learned about the carbonate equilibrium, I tried every single CO2
yeah.
method that led up to the actual getting a full canister and a regulator,
I mean,
and that's the one that worked.
it's funny that people who are, like, just starting out in this hobby think that they're, like, trying to come up with something that people haven't tried. Like, people have been trying to put CO2 in their tanks since Takashi Yamano, and what was
Mhm.
that, like, the 90s?
I don't know.
They experimented with things like seltzer and
Mhm.
passive bells of CO2 and like bubble ladders. And I mean, you're not the first. So,
So Big Cat, if my KH is 0.5 to 1, would the passive thing be worth? I mean, it would make
possibly.
a small difference. Like
Probably
that would be the water where any little bit of added CO2 is
yeah,
noticeable.
in a small tank, especially.
Right.
Now in a big tank, I don't know if it's gonna budge much, but if you have a small tank and a big bell and a low your cage, you have no cage basically. So
See,
yeah,
Nathan, the problem is if you keep buying attachments and trying different little things to make this one work, then you're going to end up spending the amount of money
yeah.
that you could have just spent on a full system. And I did that several times over. I did that. And
Yep.
it's and but like Zen said, learning from other people's mistakes, but then thinking maybe I'm different.
Maybe I could make it work. It's just like in Arrested Development when Tobias is and his wife. So he's a therapist, and his wife have like a disastrous marriage, and then she's like asking like, "Will an open marriage work?" And he's like, "Well, I've never seen it work for anyone,
But
but it
maybe.
could work for us." I mean, it's
So you're
like
saying there's a chance.
just saying there's a chance. So, you know, I bought the regulators for these tanks 4 years ago, and other than, like, Jake knocked them over once and the bubble counters snapped off and I had to replace them.
I did that once too.
I mean, that but that wasn't, like, an inherent failure of the equipment, like, that was our fault. But
Mhm.
otherwise, they've given me no problems, and I've never had to replace any parts, and they just work. They just work. And I haven't had to buy new regulators or worry. It's just nice to have things that work. So, and Uncle Smiley's aquarium says, I've noticed lately that GLA is out of a lot of CO2 diffusers. Are they struggling to stay in business? I don't know. I have bought from them. They are run by a guy whose name is Orlando. I do know that if you email him, he will get back to you immediately if you have questions. So I remember when I bought these, I said, hey, I want to do this, this, this. My setup is this, this, this. What should I buy? And he told me what to buy, which was really nice for me.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if companies that deal in the quality goods are suffering because Amazon just has any old crap.
Right.
Tiger is like trying literally everything to like trying to corner every side of the aquarium market with the craziest, stupidest shit I've ever seen.
Yeah, and think about it this, like I buy a good regulator and it's good for years and years and years and years and
Yeah,
years.
there's no consumables that
I know.
they can make money off of.
So it's difficult. I hope they're doing well.
Yeah.
I really do like their products, but I can't say.
Yeah. I noticed the SR Aquaristics. I was trying to get another regulator from them and it had been out of stock. And I finally ordered it for a slightly higher price from Aqua Cave just because I'm like, I love that regulator way too much. And
Yeah,
I don't want to try another brand because it's my
I
favorite
get that.
one. And
I totally get that. I totally get that. And that's how I am with GLA. Like I just don't want
mhm.
to try anything else. I know this works. Um, but like I know Mike has suggested there's a person who builds regulators. His name is
A
Josh.
couple of people, yeah, have
Noah,
been
I
mentioned.
think. I know that a home built regulator is the best regulator. It's the best. I do not have the skill set to build a regulator. It will
Yeah.
never happen. And at the time when I bought these, I didn't know about them. So, but if you are a person who has that skill set, you can make yourself you just have to know where to get the parts. Steven, you could do it. You can build things, but I can't. Like I don't like
I mean,
I
I'd have
don't
to
own
learn,
power
but
tools.
like I don't inherently know how to put a regulator together or know what makes each part of the regulator high quality. Other than like needle valves can be
Yeah,
really terrible.
you want to spend the money on a good needle valve. That's
Mm.
where you put your money. Like I had a regulator when I was in college with like a $10,000 needle valve. It was great. It was just like in the basement of the biology department building and it wasn't being used. And I'm like, and they're like, hey, try this. This will work good for you. It's a $10,000 regulator or a $10,000 needle valve. And it was just,
Pair that with your $10,000 pH probe.
which still kind of sucked because all pH meters kind of suck. So.
Like a pH meter is pretty okay after you calibrate it right out of the box, and then you store it for like any length of time and just throw it away. You might as well throw it away.
Well, even in labs. So first of all, you never store your electrode dry. That's bad for them. You put them in storage solution. So you can either buy a commercial storage solution.
I have some,
Yeah, it's a very
but then
saturated ion solution.
it like
That's
crystallizes
what they're
over
supposed to
time,
do.
and I didn't
Yep.
even yeah.
Yeah, because they're a very saturated ion solution. It's usually, I think, I can't remember what it is, what ion it is. I think it's like sodium, maybe it's sodium nitrate. I can't remember what
I don't
ion it
know.
is.
Let's
But
see.
anyways, it's salt. It's salt. And so you don't want to store it dry. And if you do store it dry, it's toast. You can also break electrodes really easily. And you also want to replace them every couple years. New electrodes are expensive though. So
Yeah.
Zim's Aquatic says, howdy everyone. Debating Amano shrimps. Can they be tolerant of tap water or is RO a must? Conflicting question considering some are kept with neocaridina. I have tons of Amano shrimps and I don't use RO water. I'm sure there is some water that is so shitty that they won't like it, but in my experience, they are pretty hardy and pretty adaptable. And mine are huge. They're like this big. I have been told that the big ones will kind of pester neocaridina and they're not happy friends, but lots of people keep them together. I would say as long as you have plenty of hiding places,
Yeah.
that it's
I've
just fine.
kept Amano shrimp in the mosh pit for years, and that
The mosh pit
like
is
in terms
nothing
of
but hiding places.
yeah, and it's I mean also like the GH is off the charts, and my KH say
Yeah.
it is what it is, 6 degrees out of the tap. Yeah, I
Yep.
mean because Amanos are Caridina genus, but they don't that whole like super diva sensitive Caridina stuff
Yeah.
doesn't really apply to them.
They're pretty well known to be very hardy, very easy shrimp, and pretty much everyone can keep them just fine. I will say this about them. I think they're cool organisms in and of themselves. I love when I spot them on occasion because they're so huge. But if you're buying them because you think they'll be great algae eaters, think again. I have never noticed that to be true. That said, I don't have a ton of algae. So maybe they're really helping, but I've never seen them eat algae. And in fact, they are pink because they eat a lot of krill flakes. So
I mean I've seen where like hundreds of them are deployed into a tank where it's just them and they're not given any additional food,
yeah.
and there's algae to eat, and like yeah they'll go after that, but I
Yeah.
don't
I
think
mean,
they want to do that by default.
no, and I'll also say that first of all, hundreds of them cost a lot of money. Second of all, when you buy them, they're pretty small. You're never gonna get the big boys. And your fish will eat them. Like rainbows, if they catch an amano, they're gonna eat them. Now my amanos now are giant, so they're fine, but they still hide all the time because when they were little, they had to learn to hide or be eaten. So
So let's see. Nathan said, mention I know this isn't a great system, but what can I expect to spend for everything? Let's try and stay on the cheaper side. Okay, so minimum CO2 regulator, CO2 art, $150. Sometimes it's on sale at Bulk Reef Supply for 120.
it might be
I
on
got
sale right now for Amazon Prime Day.
yeah, check that out because I
Check
actually
it
got
out.
one off of Amazon very recently for like 120, 125. So
Mhm.
and then you've got that. You already have a diffuser. Then
You
you
already
just
have
need
you
a
already have a
five
CO2
pound,
bottle.
5 pound, or like a 5 pound CO2 cylinder, like
Yep.
because he has the all in like that.
Oh,
I mean
oh
the
yeah.
DIY reactor one.
Yeah,
So
sometimes you can find those used, but brand new.
$75 maybe.
Yeah, I would say you need CO2 proof tubing. I can give you some of that for free if you don't have it.
Yeah, me too.
Um, you need your diffuser, which if you already have a diffuser, you can still use it. It's just fine. You need a good check valve, a metal check valve, and those are like $5.
Hmm.
The bubble counter will be integrated in it, so that's just fine. You don't need to buy anything separate, and that's it. You can expect for everything you need, probably you can get it done under 200 bucks. 200 bucks and peace of mind.
Yeah, for sure. Won't doing 50% water change 3 to 4 times a week in a pleco 29-gallon ruin the cycle of the tank? I
Nope.
mean, not doing those water changes would ruin the cycle a lot faster because the
Yeah.
bacteria levels will not keep up with the amount of food that you have to feed to raise a brood of like I don't know, bristlenose, common bristlenose plecos. It was like 60 something babies. That was up to
God,
150
even.
at some point. They
Oh,
have very
not even
large
this. That is
they
my
have very
not.
large and very hardy batches of plecos.
Oh God.
So,
I mean, the thing is this: if you don't have a robust enough cycle established for doing that, it can't handle water changes, you can't be breeding. You're not ready to breed
right.
fish.
Yeah.
Like, if you have a well-established tank that's been running for a couple, like a filter that's been running a couple months, let's say, it's gonna be just fine. It's gonna be just fine.
Yeah, I mean, I'm one of those people that I'll do a 60% water change while I go rinse off my sponges in the tap water and then fill it up, add prime at some point while the tank is filling like that. But that's my level of ammonium. I mean, not ammonium, chloramine in my tank. It's 1 to 2 ppm at most.
I
Sometimes
don't
it's not
even
even
have
detectable.
detectable. I don't
Yeah.
even have detectable chlorine. So, in my experience, more water changes are always good, unless you have absolutely disgusting tap water.
Yeah.
But most people don't have that. Like, especially if you have water you would drink, it's probably
Yeah,
good for a
like
lot of
just having
water.
super hard water is not disgusting. The disgusting
No,
part is whenever you have tons of dissolved heavy metals and ammonia and
chromium and
nitrate.
yeah, if you have like
S-
lots of chromium and yeah, ugh,
Is there a chromium
lead.
test?
Probably it's probably super expensive. I don't know. I mean, it would have to be very sensitive because if you shouldn't be able to detect chromium in your tank. I mean,
Yeah. I probably should have mentioned when I did that pleco breeding video is that I did have that 29-gallon running for at least a month before I started putting 1,000 baby plecos in it because it's
yeah,
that, and also, I have plenty of other systems that I can put filter media in there, and it definitely speeds things up. But
yeah. So, but I mean, if you have a robust filter, it's going to be just fine. Foxanne is just terrorized by mono shrimps. No more for her.
they can
I
be kind of
like them.
aggressive. Like if you have like a giant female that's buried because they don't know that their larva is not going to live, they are very defensive, and like you put your hand near it and it acts like it's going to attack your hand, and that's
I mean,
a little
I've
unsettling.
never had them like try to escape my tank because I have lids. Like, problem solved. And if you have rainbows, you gotta have lids, like,
Mhm.
or a net. ANNETTE, a net.
Everybody needs a net.
Everybody needs a net. Oh, here's another kitty for a nut. Not fat kitty, but a
The
cat.
floofy. The floofy one.
Much big kitty.
When your water is so bad you can't legally sell the house without putting an RO unit in.
Oh God, that's awful. That's awful. So Zim says the Home Depot water kits did check for chromium. Not sure if those are still offered or not. And Annette says, but Annette doesn't need everyone.
I mean, if you're on a super old well, you probably already know that your water is gross. But if you haven't had that water tested, I would recommend you do so.
Yeah.
Wells installed in like, I don't know, the 70s, 80s.
You should be getting your well tested anyways, especially if you have
Mm,
young children or you're pregnant or you're planning to become pregnant. You should get your well tested for your own safety.
yeah. All right. Well, I am still getting messages from work. never died down. So I think we're gonna go ahead and call this one. And let's see, Steenfot I think is doing a member stream in 10 minutes. Scotty will be doing a member stream or a stream. I forget which is which, Monday and Wednesday.
I can't remember either,
Soon.
but he'll probably
Hagen
start early because that's
Hagen Hill is streaming in about 40 minutes. So y'all got choices.
I'm gonna eat dinner, so that's my choice. But
Cool.
thank you to everyone who's here. We really appreciate all your questions. Thank you to our super chatters, and thank you to all of our members. Thank you, our lurkers, our replay crew, and we'll see you all next week.
Indeed. Bye.
Bye.